Our industry is going through a lot of change, more so than possibly any other period since I've been in the industry, which is 42 years, with so much happening in the backdrop, both regulatory and environmentally. And somebody who spends much of the time at the heart of that change is Chris Baigent-Reed from Jigsaw. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Ro. It's lovely to be here. I can't believe it's been 4 years since we last did an interview together. So it's lovely to be back in the room.
And it's lovely to have you here. Yeah, it was November 2020.
Wow.
Lots
has changed since then.
A lot has changed since then. So what's changed with you? How have you been doing? And what's happened at Jigsaw over the last few years?
Yeah, well, a ton of stuff really. And recently what we've done is we've got it graphically into a timeline, which is really interesting because then we can see all of the developments. But I guess over, my goodness, the last 4 years, just thinking back, we've got a ton of certifications. One of the most compelling ones for us was B Corp, because I really wanted something that challenged the way that we operate as a business.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you the ton of contacts that we've made as a result of that has been really positive. And we've become a very sort of small business in a group of organisations that are thinking differently about the way that they operate. And that, helps challenge the way that we work. But I guess more in line with what's happening in our sector, you're right, there's been a ton of changes and we've sort of realigned what we deliver and how we deliver it to firms to make sure that we can really support them through the challenging times that we're seeing. And we've certainly seen firms with consumer duty taking an inward look at how they're operating, what their charging model is, whether they can evidence what they've delivered, what the vulnerability aspects of their business are and how they've evidenced that they've supported clients through those challenging times in their lives. Yeah. So we've developed a consumer duty package to really help firms with that. And I guess the other thing that we're really seeing is data becoming more and more important, and the importance of clean data. And we've seen with legacy systems and transitioning technology, as you've seen, that firms really have to think seriously about the controls that they've got in place for their data. And so we do some work with firms to make sure that the MI they get out of the back end of their systems are accurate and give them what they need, both from a regulatory perspective and also in the running of their business. And the final element for me is AI. AI is the word of the moment. And we're seeing a lot of decision fatigue. Yeah. And we've recently done a piece of work where we've baselined a number of the AI providers. We've got 17 in the mix at the moment. And we've done a bit of a scorecard, which we presented to the Curo user group, just really to give them a view. And we've heard from some of the users about those that are using AI and some that aren't yet. And there's a question mark over what does the regulator think? Yeah. And that's yet to be announced. So we now have 17 AI providers that we're putting into a white paper. So that work's being done at the moment, just to really help firms understand what's happening in that landscape too.
Well, you've covered all of my questions in that little introduction. So thanks for that. I'd say let's go to lunch, but we're not quite there yet. So let's unpack some of that because you've covered an enormous amount. And of course, the starting thing was very much consumer duty in terms of impacting our industry. Yeah. So what has changed? What has caused this flurry of activity? What are the challenges firms are facing? And then we'll get into the data bit because that's the next in line as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. Well, I think...
I mean, from your perspective, obviously.
Yeah. So I think firms are having to think slightly differently, not necessarily about the service they provide. Certainly the advice firms that we work with deliver an exceptional service to their clients. But I think for some of them where the challenge came in is being able to evidence that service really clearly using the technology that they have implemented. And I think for some of them, the regulator has gone back 7 years. Well, if you've changed technology, if you've not had the rigour and robustness around your process, those things become a real challenge. And we do database assessments where we look at the segmentation piece, we look at the tail on advice firms, sort of client banks as to those clients that perhaps they're not servicing. And I think all of those things and the vulnerability and the recording of vulnerability has meant that firms have had to really take a close look at what they're doing and how they're doing, what they're charging for, and what their service proposition looks like, and how they're using their practice management system.
Well, I think that was the thing I was going to pick you up on, because you did say that firms are providing great service and all that sort of stuff. But if we put ourselves in the shoes of a couple of clients, I've got a £5 million portfolio that I'd like my IFA to look after. You've got a £1 million portfolio, sake of argument. Same IFA, chances are we're going to be in the same proposition. So why is it fair then that I have to pay 5 times the amount that you do for essentially the same service? Are you seeing firms getting into that discussion, getting into the realisation that, of course, there needs to be a little bit more sensitivity around the services rather than the proposition, the services that are delivered, and also being responsive to whether that client actually needs a service this year, for example? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the service proposition is important, and we probably see firms that have slightly different propositions according to the slices of the income or the assets that the client holds, because often their needs are different, and equally we're seeing different propositions if a client's in accumulation versus deaccumulation,
course, yeah.
and that makes a big difference. So we are seeing differences in those services, which means that there is a differentiator if somebody comes with a £5 million portfolio versus a £1 million portfolio. And for majority of the advice firms, like I say, that we see, they are outcome focused in terms of what's best for that client and how it fits with their attitude to risk and their vulnerabilities, and all that combined together to make sure that they understand what's best for the client.
Okay, so good point well made, but still doesn't get away from the challenges perhaps that Consumer Duty is presenting firms, because a key initiative has been cost versus value, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And when you start looking at cost versus value, then I suppose the inevitable consequence of that is going to be fee compression. Okay. And so how are firms going to address that real challenge? Because at the moment, if we keep it really simple, because as you know, my maths is not great, but if we keep it really simple, if fee compression results in a reduction of income by 50%, say, then the ratio of one advisor to 100 clients is going to go from one advisor to 200 clients just to stand still. How then, I mean, if firms are faced with that reality, and you know better than anybody, that change in itself is massive. If they're going to go through that massive change process in order to address the fee compression issue, potential fee compression issue, wouldn't it be sensible to start thinking, well, actually, rather than 1 to 200, let's go to 1 to 500, because we're going to go through a lot of change anyway just to go to the 200, so let's do it properly. And then that calls into play, how do we service that many clients? And I guess where I'm going with this is more dynamic proposition, effectively lane switching. This is not me speaking. I had a fantastic guy called Matt Lonsdale. I'm not sure if you know Matt from Davies. Fabulous guy, and he has created a white paper called Wealth Management, version 4.0 or whatever. And this was a big part of his contention. The industry needs to be re-engineered, and if we're going to do it, then we need to do it properly. What's your take on that? Is that in your world relevant, or do you think it's just whatever?
I think there are a number of components there, aren't there, Roland? Yeah. And I think firms have to think differently about how they service their clients. Yeah. And we're seeing, with portal capabilities, there's a bit of perhaps self-serve in there. There's a bit, we'd like to see our advisor. Yeah. There's exchange of information that's really important. And that gives a more dynamic capability. And we did some process mapping for a firm who had a portal versus a firm who didn't. And we know through that onboarding process, they can get a 28.84% efficiency.
28.84, that is pretty specific.
Exactly, very specific. And that's the
2
beauty.
decimal places, my goodness.
Well, of course, it's got to be accurate, Roland. So, So for us, it's finding those efficiency gains. We've also done some research, and actually 50% of advisors' time tends to be spent doing paperwork. So actually we look at, again, process mapping, to look at those swim lanes to say, well, actually the advisor's benefit is in front of the client and providing that advice. And therefore, how can you re-engineer businesses to enable them to be more efficient? And then, of course, AI comes into play. So we had a firm who said, when our advisor goes out, he takes a paraplanner and they do the meeting notes, etc. And instead what we've done is we've recommended technology, and that technology has been implemented and works really well and has created a massive efficiency gain for them, such that they can service more clients, but whether they could get to a 1 to 500 ratio, not convinced, but they can certainly do more.
I think that actually, when you sort of dig into the white paper, you'll see that it's to do with the services that are delivered from the top tier, which is full fat advice, through to effectively as and when, to execution only, to whatever. So different styles of services, which means of course you might have 50 or 60, 70 firms at the top level, individuals at the top level, maybe not even that, a bigger chunk below, and an even larger chunk below. So you can actually, provide the service that the client is looking for at the price they're happy to pay, and therefore increase your take, even though you might be spending less time with the high net worth clients that up until now, that's all you've done. So I think that's the sort of argument around that. And do you think that firms are getting it? Do you think they're beginning to understand the importance of change, the importance of addressing these real infrastructural challenges, really?
Yeah, I do think they do. And I think, I've been in financial services now for 30 years.
Newbie.
Absolutely.
Mind you, I had Roderick Renson here the other day. He's been here for 52 years.
I know.
My God.
It's incredible,
I thought I was the boss at 42, but no.
You don't get that badge, Ro. Definitely not. I think they do. And I think, our sector has gone through so much regulatory change. And sometimes there's a view that actually, does the regulator truly understand some of the challenges and really understand it from an end consumer perspective? And I think that's where some of the challenge comes in. But I certainly think that firms are looking closely at what they're doing and how they're doing it, because they need to do stuff quite differently, particularly when you think about things like intergenerational wealth and how that transfer of assets is going to flow, and whether or not the same relationships are required in the same or different ways in order to meet those different generations.
Yes. And so, as you said in the introduction, it's back to data and how data is captured, data governance, access to data reporting, and all of that sort of stuff. So looking at the technology landscape, and I know this is going to be difficult for you because you want to try and tread an even keel across all of the people you work with and the companies you support. But hey, how can you go through that digital transformation process when you're sitting on a tech stack that's 21 years old, that was launched when Steve Jobs launched the iPod, which was never designed to do the sort of stuff that you're talking about today?
Yeah, and we do what we describe as a discovery with firms to, really get under the skin of that tech stack, to say, well, actually, how is that tech stack supporting your business, not just today, but in future? And how does the data flow, and where are those integration points, and how good are those integration points, and could you improve them? So, certainly we look at all of those aspects, and what we tend to see is a firm that says, I'm tech enabled, but the reality is they are not. No. And therefore we have the practice management that sits in the centre, because it tends to be the hub of the data. And then we have, an element that says these are all the bits that you have integrated and these are the bits that aren't integrated. And there'll be no surprise that most of them sit in the non-integrated. And part of what we look to firms to do is to say, well, actually, let's make sure you have a better integrated journey. Let's make sure your data is right. Let's make sure the providers are integrated so that you are getting the data you need. And then the other element to this is that practice management systems have a wealth of data that sit on their platforms. The challenge for most firms is the way that data is presented back to them.
And that was where I was going with this. How do you get the data out? Because you mentioned, well, we mentioned when we were chatting before this about our roundtables that we've been doing with consolidators. We've had 2, and we've spoken to 25 of the larger consolidators during that process under Chatham House rules and all that sort of stuff. But every single one of them have got the same problem, and that is how do we get meaningful management information from our systems, and also the practice of some firms to charge the client to give them their data back. We were speaking to one firm not so long ago, 30-man business, not big, part of a bigger organisation, but they wanted to take a regular dump of data from their CRM so they could put it into, well, the practice management system, so they could put it into their own data warehouse to do their reporting around it. They were quoted £60,000 a year by their supplier to have their data returned. I mean, how is that good for our industry, and how can that help firms who are all suffering the same thing, access to data, get a grip? Because the ultimate problem, I suppose, for these firms is if they are all different departments are running different reports at different time, mashing it together to produce MI or a regulatory return or a PI return, often that data is out of date or just plain wrong. Yeah. And how does that work? How does that work in this new digital age where firms need to capture their data? They need to have robust data governance. They need access. How does that work now?
Well, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, but you're the boss. You're dealing with this every day. So I'm interested to get your take. I know what I think, but it's what you think is important.
Yeah, and so, we've seen a number of firms where they create their own dashboards, and you're right, and they go through quite a large manual exercise to pull all this data together into a dashboard that looks really nice, but it's done once a month or once a week, and it takes a huge amount of resource. So actually what we're seeing is there are really nice dashboards provided by third parties like Woven and the Flower Group and DCI and others that I like, and the reason why I like them is because they give you a different take on your data, a really clear take on your data. And my view is if most of us, as we talked about earlier, are visual. So if we're able to see something clearly, we are able to make really good decisions off the back of it. And that's where I think sometimes the practice management solutions fail to provide that data into something that gives that cleanness and visibility that's really important to those firms in order to give them the capability to make those decisions.
Well, the reason that they fail is because they can't do it. That's the reality, because of the fact that they've been built over 20 years, the data tables don't connect under the hood, so there are infrastructural issues with the tech. And given the regulator, the FCA has spent, £120 million over the last 3 years becoming much more digitally enabled. As you said again in your introduction, they're now really digging into firms because they know they can't get the information they need and ask the questions. And, with the consolidation that's going on, I mean, this is another big risk. The FCA must love the consolidators because they're sort of hoovering up the smaller firms that the regulator doesn't want to regulate because it's too much like hard work. And they're PE backed, which means they've got the money. And so all of a sudden you've got a regulator who knows you've got tech that can't give them what they want when they want it, and you're right in the crosshairs. So how's the industry going to square that circle?
Well, I think they're taking time to see how they're going to square that circle.
Am I being controversial?
Well, maybe a little bit, Ray. Maybe a little bit. But I think, technology has to be better to be able to support those firms really well and has to be more collaborative. I think sometimes, when we talk about integrations, so for instance, if you take provider integrations, and at the user group we ran for Curo users, it was really clear that a ton of work has gone on there, but it's not made easy. And it should be made easier. With API and open access databases, we should be able to plug and play these solutions in. And, firms are saying, look, we want transactional data. That's great, but that is a ton of extra data coming down those tracks.
But most providers can't provide it.
But there are some that can.
There are some that can. But again, when you say transactional data, they don't really mean transactional data. What they mean is income and outgoings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So top level, not the actual transactions. Just talking to Jonathan Gumby at Transact about the amount of work that they do every day to close the books with everything. That's massive. And of course, that just wouldn't make any sense. But yes, you're right. And things will change in time, and obviously things are changing in terms of the core data. But I guess it's right back to the fact that, in theory, it sounds great, but in practice, getting it out is always the challenge, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so, given that reality, given that the bulk of our clients or bulk of our industry have got all the same problems, how do you see tech evolving? How do you see tech addressing this once and for all? Well, of course, this is where you start asking me about Cure on Power Platform, but I won't put words in your mouth.
Not yet, Ro. Hold that thought just for a moment.
Thank you.
I think what tech firms have to do is simplify. Yeah. And I think the challenge is that you get this piece of technology and it's not necessarily configured. It doesn't give the firms the tools they need to kick off with it as soon as they implement it. Yeah. And it's not made easy. When we pick up an iPhone, we've got the apps and it's made really simple. Even people who are in different demographics can use it because it's made as simple as possible.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that's the failing of our industry, is that things are made too complicated. Yeah. Clients have simple requirements, really. They may have some complexities within there that's understood by a group of professionals, and they can provide that advice, but it's how that translates onto that layer of technology that supports them. Yeah. And I know, so you'd like me to mention the Power Platform, clearly.
Oh, no, I don't. You mention what you like.
I think you do, Rose. So why don't we go to the Power Platform? So, Cure have done a lot of work, or Time for Advice have done a lot of work to develop a platform that sits within the Microsoft ecosystem.
Correct.
So that firms can have that control internally. And one of the things that we've been talking to firms about is, as the technology landscape is changing, what also needs to change is the way that firms think about the skill set they need internally in order to manage that technology effectively.
Yeah, definitely.
And therefore, I guess my question to you is, you will see your firms transitioning from Curo Azure onto the Power Platform.
Correct.
How do you see that working in reality for them, and what are Time for Advice doing in order to support that transition?
So we're building the proposition to enable our clients to migrate. There's a commercial imperative to migrate for obvious reasons, and from our clients' perspective, they need to be on the next generation of technology. So that is underway in terms of design and how we're moving it forward. We're not going to force change anytime soon. We have a 4-year window anyway before we have to close the books, but we want to complete that journey within the next 2 years. And the reason for that is not all firms will be ready to take on Cure on Power Platform. Though larger firms will, because as you say, they've got the in-house expertise and capability to do that. Smaller firms have a reliance on us to help them with that project, and also third parties, go-to-market partners who obviously we want to bring up the curve in terms of Power Platform, because we do see it as next generational tech. We see it as the answer actually to the challenges that our industry is facing, as you'd expect, because it's not about data silos. It's not about us holding your data and you having to struggle to get it. The Curo is on Power Platform sits within your ecosystem, in your dataverse, and therefore gives you absolute access across not only Curo, but all of the other data sources within your dataverse. So it changes everything. But yeah, I think your point, and I completely agree about the simplicity thing. The industry is complex, actually, when you consider all the moving parts, all of the bits and bobs that need to be done in order to comply, but also more importantly, to provide a sort of holistic and comprehensive service to clients and cater for all the different client types that we touched on earlier. But I think having built that complexity, the secret is how you simplify. And of course, again, this is where we believe Cure on Power Platform changes the game, to coin a phrase, simply because, of course, you're not constrained by a product called Curo. You can build, and some of our clients, as you know, have built power apps that provide effectively persona-driven applications focusing on the user. So all they see is what they need to see to do their job. And what they've also built are onboarding processes, so a client can easily onboard. And we're doing this with, you've mentioned James at Pridis. They've done a fantastic job, and certainly that's a conversation we're going to be picking up with the guys there. Obviously, the work we're doing with Money Info to build a full digital journey around onboarding, that's in process, in train. But I think the key, as you say, is to provide an ecosystem that is sensitive to the fact that you need to be aware of the user's capability. And the iPhone has changed everything, there's no doubt at all about it. It set the expectation. And the big recognition, I suppose, from a tech provider's perspective is building complexity, it's inevitable, you have to build complexity. Taking that complexity and making it simple, now that's hard.
Yep.
And that's why it's not often managed. And I suppose within the traditional back office systems, which are stuck, they are products that work in a particular way, and that's the way it is. They don't have that, the benefit of what we have within the Microsoft ecosystem to extend and develop and build with no-code technology. And that's, of course, now being manifested by these other companies that are using the tool set at their disposal to deploy solutions that work not only for their clients, but also for their advisors and other users. And I think that journey will absolutely kick off. As you know, the journey we've been on, a lot of journeys going on, the journey we've been on the transition effectively from Curo in Azure, our old version of Curo, to Power Platform, we expect it to be 3 months based on our conversation with Microsoft.
Yeah.
It's been 3 years,
yeah.
And it's been all consuming. And so it's been frustrating for us, it's been frustrating for our clients who feel that perhaps they've been neglected over this period, and to a degree they have been neglected because all of the attention has been on our strategic development, because then everybody benefits from that. As I say, it's taken much longer than we anticipated, but the baseline 1 release will be done and completed by the end of November, and then Time for Advice 2 is launched. Time for Advice 2 comes to market, and that's something we're all really excited about. We've already been engaging with a number of nice firms, as you know, and one closed yesterday, a significant multidisciplinary business, legal firm and wealth manager and financial planner, and we've got a number of other sort of headline clients coming on board over the course of the next few weeks, which is really exciting, and they then begin their implementation. But some of our larger consolidators, they've already started the journey, same with Pridis, for example, and we want to explore how these chartered firms are using the tech to deliver precisely what we're talking about, and that I think is incredibly exciting and something that we're really looking forward to, because at the end of the day, the most powerful technology is the technology you can use. And that's Definitely. Really what this is about, isn't it?
It is. And I think, what Time for Advice have done is that you've got a SharePoint site that really explains to firms, and there's videos and documents, etc. in there, what they need to do in order to prepare. And I think for me, it's that preparation piece. Have they thought about their processes and how their processes look? Have they considered, what is working really well for them, and perhaps what they really need to consider changing, and how the shape of their data may change as a result, and the skills that they need. Do they want to build power apps?
Yeah.
Could they benefit from the work that Pridis have delivered? And it looks really, really nice.
Yeah.
So, so there's a ton of questions in the mix, and I think the support that Time for Advice can provide is absolutely crucial to those firms to make sure that they have a smooth transition from Azure to Power Platform.
Well, that's the mission, because I said we're not forcing change. It has to be done at a pace where people can manage that change, because it is going to be different. It looks different, it looks significantly better in my view, but as I say, what we want to then do is be more responsive to our clients' feedback. The user groups that you've been helping facilitate for us, which has been fantastic, shows there's an appetite. It's not just about email management of clients is about getting them round the table and talking about their challenges and us hearing them and understanding how we can help them on that journey. And that's the thing which is, I think, about to start. All of the work has been focused on creating Cure on Power Platform. It's now about how do we leverage the value that Power Platform delivers to us and Dataverse delivers to us. And that, I think, is going to be a really exciting, challenging, but really exciting journey, because it means that at last we can answer the issues that clients are throwing at us without compromise and without regret, because it doesn't mean we have to change all of Curo. What it means is you can concentrate on delivering the requirements based on extending Curo using the tools at your disposal, and it becomes tremendously exciting. So no, I'm super optimistic and looking forward very much to the next phase of Time for Advice. You mentioned AI. Obviously, yes. AI is a major word salad at the moment in terms of different providers doing different things, and there's lots of confusion and lots of excitement, and it is the future and blah blah blah. I'm not going to go into AI now because, frankly, it's too big a subject.
It is.
I was going to give you a little, not prod, but a little bit of a flag around the work you've done. So if and when that is available, it'd be really good to associate that with this interview on our website. We're in the process of completely redoing our website as we speak, so that would be really good. And then clients can obviously read it if that's available to them, and that would be fantastic.
Well, absolutely, and there's a ton of work that's gone into it. So we're now at 17 providers, and we're gonna baseline it with those 17, and that will be our version 1. So we've gone through a really good due diligence process where we've sent them a questionnaire, we've had the demos, we've recorded them. And we've taken feedback from a number of industry specialists that have talked about, actually, well, wouldn't it be good if you included this? So we've taken that all into account to make sure that we give a comprehensive review as to what's available for firms and try and dispel the myth, because you're right, a lot of them are doing similar things, a lot of transcribing and that sort of stuff. So it's who is going to be the winner and the not so winners, because some of them have only been going about 12 months. So you just think, okay, where is their future? Where's their funding coming from? And all of that stuff is really important to understand.
And it really is. And as I say, there will be a lot of fallout. There's no question in my mind, because everybody's trying to do similar things, but it's how long they can last and how big the runway is and where the interest lies. I think AI absolutely will become a critical part of what we do. I mean, within Cure on Power Platform, as you know, within the Microsoft ecosystem, we have Copilot. Last year, Microsoft spent $10 billion on AI, and there are something like 130 Copilots now available. Plus, of course, you've got Copilot Studio and all that sort of stuff. But that's a whole new world of joy, and that's a big job. And so working with domain experts who understand the whole AI potential is fantastic. But again, it comes right back to data, access to data, and not paying lip service to access. It's real access, which is going to be the truth. Otherwise, AI, God bless it, will be very efficient of turning out nonsense. And I think this is always the challenge. So we'll see where that goes, but it's going to be really good to hear the outcome of your research. And I think, once that's done, maybe another interview would be good, just focusing precisely on this subject, because I think we'll be doing quite a lot of that as well, because it will become a major influence. But I don't know how long that will be, maybe a few years. Things will settle down, things will develop and evolve. And certainly Copilot is now available in Curo. Not that we switch it on for everybody because it's untrained, and like everything else, there's a lot of learning to be done. But for me, it's not beyond the wit of man to believe that within a few years, you'll be having a conversation with Curo and it will be giving you the answers. I can see it happening.
Look forward to that day.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Chris, I think that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to come down today. I think that was really interesting. As I say, lots of questions have been raised, I think, by the topics that we've covered off, and definitely worth revisiting, maybe early next year, once things are beginning to become clearer for firms. But that was great.
Well, we'd love to do that.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you, Chris.
And you, Ro.